A full sheet, no?
Yeah.
Lips.
All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Vish Ponnampalam, and I'm an engineering lead at Meta. Welcome, everyone, to this Birds of a Feather session hosted by Telecom Infrastructure Project. And we're going to be talking about enabling Metaverse-ready networks. The Metaverse is, is a hot topic here this week. And in a sense, we're already using a lot of services that look very much like what we'll experience in the Metaverse. So, in the last 2 years, we've depended on services such as teleconferencing, cloud gaming, and video calling to stay connected with our loved ones, with our colleagues, and also with our community. And even today, even though a large number of us are here together, there are many more of our colleagues joining us through live stream. And the Metaverse is really an evolution of these kind of experiences. But the promise of the Metaverse is to make these experiences a lot more engaging and a lot more meaningful. And this is going to place a huge set of new requirements on networks, not only in terms of throughputs, latency, but also in terms of understanding what kind of services are being delivered. So it's a huge challenge, but at the same time, it's a huge opportunity for our industry and probably for every one of us here. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be the topic of our discussion. We also wanted to discuss how Telecom Infrastructure Project, or TIP, can play a part in enabling the Metaverse. And to join me here on the discussion, we have four distinguished guests, and I'll introduce them in a second. So just as a plan of what we're going to do, we're going to have about 30 minutes of discussion, a panel discussion followed by Q&A, and I encourage everyone to participate in the Q&A. So let's get started with the intro. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Juan Carlos, who's sitting right on my left here. Juan Carlos is a senior vice president in Telefónica Group, and his responsibilities are technology, innovation, and ecosystems. He leads a number of activities and projects within really bleeding-edge technologies like cloud computing, private networks, and network slicing. In particular, one of Juan Carlos's responsibilities is figuring out how Telefónica participates in industry forums and standards bodies, including TIP. And personally, Juan Carlos, I know you're a TIP board member, as well as you're on the GSMA technology group, as well as INSEA and also the GSMA technology Edge Cloud Forum. In addition to Phitonic, which is the Telefónica 5G ecosystem lab. So welcome to this discussion. And on my right here, I'd like to introduce Víctor Fernández. Víctor is with Vodafone Group, and he's a manager of Network as a Service, and the network becoming a platform is going to be one of our discussion topics here today, as well as leading a team working on network APIs that exposes APIs to developers as well as business platforms. Víctor is also an expert on connected drones, and he's published many papers on that. And also he has a well-rounded experience in pretty much the entire telco stack, starting from devices to RAN to core. I'd like to welcome Víctor.
Yep, thank you very much.
And then next to Víctor, we have Rick Lievano. Rick is the CTO, a worldwide CTO for Microsoft telecommunication industry. And within that role, Rick's main responsibility is to help service providers figure out solutions and reference architectures for their ever-changing needs. And Rick is also a very active member of many industry groups, and he's a very strong proponent of open standards and frameworks. And in particular, Rick is very much involved in the TM forum, and within that, he's a member of the collaboration subcommittee, which oversees creation and adoption of best practices and standards to deliver value to its membership. In particular, one of the areas I know, Rick, you're working on right now is helping CSPs infuse machine learning and AI into their business workflows.
Good.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Rashan Jibowu. Rashan is with Meta, and he leads a team of data scientists and engineers and product managers that deliver products and services to inform CSPs on their network investments. So apart from figuring out what these metrics are, defining them, and measuring them, Rashan and his team also use the same metrics to influence teams within Meta and also the CSP partners that we work with. And prior to joining Meta, Rashan has been involved in a number of startups and companies, building companies working, leveraging AI in many different areas, including financial services, real estate, and healthcare. I cannot think of a better group of people to start off this discussion with, so let's get started. I'm going to start with a question for Juan Carlos. This week, we've heard a lot of things from many companies about the Metaverse, including yours, Telefónica. And I know you guys are thinking far ahead and really thinking about the disruption that Metaverse is going to bring. So my question to you was, and I know that you've been talking about delivering Metaverse at scale, but also delivering it in a sustainable manner. And my question to you is, first of all, what does the Metaverse mean to you? And then what are the top of mind issues for you when it comes to enabling the Metaverse?
Okay, so thank you, Vish. Well, we have, of course, the definition of Metaverse we use is, well, the general one, a combination of virtual worlds where individuals may work, meet, socialize, have fun, and create new experiences, without the need of being physically together. Okay, this is a general conception, but we think is probably more than that. It's an amazing evolution of the internet and a new way to use it. Okay, as our chairman said some days ago, it is like changing from using the internet from the outside, from a window, to getting into the internet, to penetrate into the internet and be part of it, having an immersive experience, so that the individual is no longer watching, but also part of an element in the virtual world. And having said this, I think we must take, feet to the ground, and think that even if we have already a good part of the elements that we will need for the metaverse, so everyone may have experience already augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality in different applications. We still have, a lot of questions to solve in terms how this will be fully developed and at the scale. Okay, there are probably technical issues to solve, a lot of them, and also the rules for this new metaverse are still to be written. So then I think we have still things to develop. The metaverse will require, in general, the combination of multiple virtual digital contents with the physical real world in a seamless way. And this means that this will require a lot of great capabilities and capacities from the network that we don't have today, and we'll have to develop. So we need a fully fledged 5G in the access. We will need fiber to the home and the new GPON technologies. We'll need the new generation of Wi-Fi 6 and 7. All of this combined with new computing capabilities, so graphical processing, spatial computing, and very likely a lot of add-on platform services like artificial intelligence or blockchain. Okay, so as you can imagine, this is representing very likely a great pressure on what the network will have to deploy. And one of the first challenges we have is of course, how can we do this deployment in a sustainable way? Okay, and when we say sustainable, we mean sustainable from an energy and resource consumption, and also from a financial perspective. Okay, analysts are saying things like in the next decade, we will need, with the advent of the metaverse, probably 20 times more data usage and up to 1,000 times a higher computing power.
Those are big numbers.
Exactly. So, and this means that probably the technology we have today will not be enough, and we'll have to, develop a lot of new things to make that possible. Okay, and for that, I think this is an effort that the community will have to do. And it will not be just the network committee. It will be a coordination of the cloud and telco communities working together and trying to find the right match for these things. The challenge is precisely that coordination. No, these two communities typically have worked in silos, no isolated. No, they have different mindsets, different ways of working. And making these two communities understand each other and collaborate to make the metaverse possible is the first challenge. And well, the second again is all the capabilities, no, that the network will have to provide. We mentioned the 5G, the fiber, the Wi-Fi. We can also mention all the IoT management platform you will need to digitalize all the physical network objects and assets and represent them in the virtual world. Okay, we will need as well all this 5GSA, the cloud-native architecture, to be able to bring the new functions the metaverse will need in a very agile, automatic and rapid way to facilitate the development of the metaverse applications. We will need telco edge computing. We'll need edge computing close to the customer. So the metaverse application, many of them will have to be executed very close to the customer. And finally, we will need something that we will discuss later on, control on the performance of the network and the quality of the network. And this is something that things like network slicing will bring. Okay?
Yeah.
First step and fundamental is the integration of the application with the network. Okay? And this is something that will require network as a service concept to be developed. And this is a fundamental work that we are starting now to work on. We launched yesterday the Camera project at the Linux Foundation together with the GSMA, and that will be the place probably where we will start this opening of capabilities to the metaverse applications to control the network characteristics. So
a lot of things that you actually said implies that we can't really treat applications and networks as two different silos.
Yeah.
And we've been kind of like operating that way, and that hopefully is going to change with the dawn of the metaverse. So that brings me to Victor. So your group is looking at exposing network level APIs, and we've been hearing a lot about like network aware applications and application aware networks for a long time. How do you think that those paradigms are going to change as we introduce metaverse?
Yes, I think it's actually quite related to what you just said. Like we have at the moment, like applications and networks, like two different silos. So network as a platform is actually like kind of the piece in the middle that it's missing. So we think that network as a platform will enable faster product and services delivery. So we know that the technical capabilities are there, are in the network. But the challenge that we often face is that how we can make an integration easy with third parties, especially when we talk about like different markets, different. We know like the network portfolio is quite complex, so we have a lot of different vendors, a lot of different software versions. Even within the same network vendors, we may have different capabilities. So what we are trying to do with network as a platform is hide all that complexity, so we will abstract that complexity, so then we can expose network capabilities so they can be easily consumed by third parties. So in this case, it could be the metaverse. So the concept is simple. We first find out which are the features, the network information, the network capabilities in general that are requested by any third party. Again, talking about the metaverse, anything. Second step is we abstract the underlying complexity of all of our networks, because network as a platform is actually, it's not just like the network expression function of the core network. It's much bigger than that. We're talking about core network, fixed network, radio, transport, it's everything. And then once we have that, we develop APIs to expose that information. So basically, we're just trying to make your life easier. So we take all those things and we want to make things simple, more flexible, and especially more accessible. This is just the beginning, but hopefully in a few months it will be just as easy as you just go to our website, enter the developer portal, you can just browse over the API catalog, and then in a matter of seconds you will be able to try it out and then integrate it within your system. We think that's the way to go. Of course, maybe networks APIs cannot be separated of IT APIs, because when we talk about Metaverse or any other consumer, they don't need to know like what's a network API or IT API. So our vision is that we'll have a single API catalog that will give access to any capability. It doesn't matter then if, like on the southbound, it's going to a network element or maybe an IT system. It's something that we want to make transparent for the end user. And again, being part of an operator as Vodafone that has a footprint of a lot of local markets, what we are trying to do is also expose global APIs in the sense that if you are Metaverse that are present in different local markets, you only need to do one integration. So what happens today, if you want to integrate your product with Vodafone Spain, then it's one project. If you want to do it in Vodafone UK, it's a different one.
That's not scalable.
Exactly. Yeah. You do one single integration and we take care of everything else.
Right. No, that's great. So this could define really like what we do in the next few years and maybe even for the next decade or more.
It's actually quite linked with what Juan Carlos was saying about camera, because it's not something we cannot aspire at being the only operator doing that. So if we really want this to take off, we need to somehow be able to expose the same kind of APIs and also like it's easy for the third parties to consume the capability regardless the operator.
So Rick, a unique thing about you on this panel is that you come from a company that has feet on both sides of this.
A little bit.
Yes. So on the Metaverse side, you guys, Microsoft has been a pioneer in terms of games, HoloLenses, and so on. Mm-hmm. And then on the network side, you've been helping a lot of operators through their digital transformation journeys through Azure. And my question to you is, the introduction of Metaverse and us all starting to work, how's that going to impact the journeys of the CSPs that you're going to work with?
So the way I like to think about it, when I was trying to understand what's the whole Metaverse thing about, right? I can barely even spell it. But it's really around the way that Microsoft defines it. It's really the third generation or the third wave of the internet platform reaching consumers, primarily consumer-based. When you think about the first wave being the 90s internet, right? The web browser, very much PC-based. The second wave being where we are today. These lovely mobile devices that have grown into our hands. We can't keep our eyes off. And the third generation really just being where we're moving towards these futuristic technologies. And it's still very nascent, right? We're just at the beginning. True, it's been around gaming for years. It's beginning to move into digital venues, maybe some e-commerce, eventually enterprise, but we're at the very beginning. In fact, if you recall from the first generation or the first wave of internet platforms, when everybody had a web page out there, you had the under construction signs, right? That's where we are now in the Metaverse. We're under construction, right? And let's just hope that we don't have these ugly animated Java applets that were all over the pages, blinking and being really obnoxious, but that's what happened then. But really, it's very nascent. We're working through and kind of defining what it truly is, what it means. But I think did anybody here watch Jose Maria's, the Telefónica CEO, his keynote yesterday? So considerable amount of time was spent around Metaverse and defining really what that is and what impact it will have for operators. And so great session, we highly recommend you watch it. But what you get out of that is that companies like Meta, like Microsoft, cannot build the Metaverse alone. We really need to partner closely with operators, because the reality is that the underlying capabilities of this ultra broadband connectivity, 5G fiber, is going to be necessary in order for the Metaverse to reach its full potential, right? It's not going to be the gaming-based Metaverses that you have today. It's really going to be a much more connected, much more personalized, rich experience that's multimodal. It's not just going to be a headset. It could be other means of devices that perhaps don't exist today, right? Again, that's not going to happen in a silo, right? It's not going to happen in a clean room. We're going to work closely with an ecosystem of partners in order to build this capability. And as we all know, the metaverse is not a singular place. It's not just one huge metaverse that is going to host all the different use cases and applications. There's going to be a plethora of millions of metaverses that may handle specific use cases, and so that's ultimately what we're driving towards. The other thing to consider is is the metaverse the killer app for 5G and edge consumer, right? We hear that all the time. Almost every conversation we have with carriers kind of ends with, hey, what is the killer app for driving my 5G utilization, for leveraging those edge assets that I have, that beachfront real estate that I have with edge? Is the metaverse that killer app? May very well be. But if you as an operator don't invest in ensuring that your network has the capacity, the capability to push that metaverse to its full potential, you'll never find out.
So this is really a collaboration between the app developers and the network service providers, and maybe people like you who are both as well. So
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, that brings me to Rashan. In the introduction, we talked a lot about network connectivity analytics portfolio, which helps CSPs get feedback on their investments, and then internally we consume that data within Meta to deliver our service better to our customers. How do you think this work will evolve and enable the metaverse?
Enabling metaverse-ready networks requires us to at least have some sort of idea about what it might actually look like. And the panelists here have given us a view of that. And I agree that it's still under construction, and there's more for us to figure out over the months and years. I want to take a step away from connectivity analytics for a moment and actually just address ways in which we can be working together as an ecosystem to enable this for all of us. And I really do think that our ability to get the metrics right, especially target performance thresholds, as opposed to focusing on infrastructure or even what these specific experiences might be like, is actually quite important. And especially if we're able to target the right performance metrics for networks with the use cases we wish to enable, that we'll have a much clearer understanding of, one, what the metaverse actually is, and two, what networks and application companies like Meta and Microsoft need to do to enable that. And so I can see many ways for us to be working together on this. One of them is, so yes, internally we are innovating on the process by which we develop these metrics. And it really is rooted in a notion of quality of service. You mentioned throughput, you mentioned latency, being really anchored around quality of experience, where I think we've got some responsibilities to figure out what that actually means and how we associate them in ways that are quite powerful for all of us. But we should be working together on getting the metrics right? That's the underlying point. It shouldn't be done in a silo. We should be working together to figure out whether the quality of experience metrics we think we have and the quality of service metrics that we all know and love are the right ones and the ones that we ought to be focusing on for the entirety of the ecosystem. Another way of working together is probably through experimentation. And while we have some alpha programs in place on metric setting with select partners in connectivity and connectivity analytics, we also have some, and we're starting to build some to work on experiments. These will be answering questions like, what types of architectures are actually most effective in enabling a metaverse-ready network? An answer that we probably don't know a lot about now, but we will know soon. And our ability to be working with operators to set up those experiments, answer those questions, is another great way for us to be partnering together. The third, and I'll pause on this last point, I think is, this is also within connectivity analytics, things that we're trying to do. I call it creating a visibility map. But I think really at the heart of it, what we're trying to achieve is a network segment level understanding of the performance necessary for each component of a network. So that's acknowledging Meta's production network, right? Microsoft likely has one too. It's acknowledging ISPs. And at least in fixed land, it's acknowledging home and businesses. And the idea here is that enabling metaverse-ready networks likely requires the whole of that and each individually to reach certain performance targets that enable us to deliver the experiences we all would like to for the metaverse as a whole. So I really just wanted to just outline those three areas of potential collaboration. We can definitely talk more about connectivity and connectivity analytics as well.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important that, at least in the context of TIP, we understand ways that we can be partnering together.
It's definitely about collaboration across this industry. So, Victor, let me ask you this. So, Vodafone has been a very strong proponent of Open RAN, and it feels like disaggregating the network is one sure way of enabling everyone to collaborate together. How do you feel Open RAN can help enable the metaverse?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think it's just another piece of the puzzle. So if I think in the metaverse, whatever that is, no, like at least in my head, it's something that you should be able to access everywhere. And I was talking before about not making capabilities accessible like via these APIs. But those capabilities are in the network, and for that we need to have a network everywhere. And that's where I think Open RAN it's coming into place. So I think overall, Open RAN is good news. It's good news for Vodafone. It's good news for the metaverse. I'm sure you all saw the news about Vodafone a couple of days ago. We made the first call over 5G
Yes.
live Open RAN system in Spain.
Historic.
Yeah, that was very good news. So that means that Open RAN is not just a concept anymore. It's something that it's here to stay, and it will bring. I would summarize it like in two big points. So one, at least related to the metaverse. One point is like Open RAN will make our deployments like more affordable, and that means that we'll be able to make deployments in places that maybe we were not able before. And ultimately, that means like potential customers for the metaverse. So we're, again, as we talk about this ubiquity and being able to access the metaverse everywhere, I think this will enable potential new customers for the metaverse. And then the other big point, I would say, is innovation. So Open RAN, as you may know, it fosters innovation. It uses these open platforms where third-party developers will have access and will be able to develop like new use cases that then metaverse will be able to use. So again, I think those 2 points are going really to help the metaverse like really take off.
So definitely Open RAN is a piece of the puzzle. Rick, I feel like private networks is also going to be another piece of this puzzle. And you have very deep experience advising customers and building solutions for them. How do you think, what role do you think private networks will play in enabling the metaverse?
So the first thing that comes to mind is, why are we not doing this in the metaverse? Anyway.
That's our plan next year.
So the metaverse really, they're going to come in different shapes and sizes, right? Public, private, and everything in between. The way that helps me think through this is, remember in the inception of the web, so many companies had intranets, right? Why did they do that, right? They had their own private instance of web applications, and they did so for various different reasons. One was performance, right? Remember back in the day, you had dial-up internet, you had slow broadband connections, they really couldn't deal with the load, and so companies deployed internet technologies internally to deal with HR applications, other line of business tools, and so forth, until certain capabilities caught up. Bandwidth, availability, security with TLS and SSL being baked into everything, right? And so it took time for internet to catch up to internet capabilities, or vice versa, right? And so that's not that different from where we are today, the metaverse, in the sense that there's going to be a lot of use cases that potentially use significant resources where the internet just simply won't scale today, right? And so those types of scenarios could be things like in a stadium, at a private venue, where, again, you may want to augment the experience for the attendees via a virtual reality or an augmented reality type of metaverse scenario, right? In that case, it makes perfect sense to, run that processing via a private 5G network, do the processing for that application on the edge. Remember that metaverse applications essentially are video streaming, live video streaming applications, where the content, by their pure nature, it can't be cached by CDN, right? It's active, live, real-time content. They can't really take advantage of some of the technologies that we've invented in order to deal with those types of volumes, right? Content delivery network as an example. And so you do have to take a look at where some of these private networks are going to provide the necessary level of, say, bandwidth, latency, edge capability in order to drive these scenarios to some of these use cases like venues, like esports, et cetera. Very important. For us, we're obviously investing heavily not only in the metaverse piece, but also in the private connectivity, the private MEC, the private ability to deliver these services wherever you happen to be, internet or not. And in that regard, we're actually working with the Telecom Infra project. We're part of the working group around private wireless, trying to push the envelope there as to what's capable, what's available, and how can the private wireless working group in this case can really start contributing into the overall ecosystem of these types of solutions.
That's a very interesting perspective, Rick. So you brought up the good topic of how can TIP contribute. So I'm going to ask Rashan this question. So you talked about analytics, for example, and the need to harmonize around metrics. And I think, Rick, you also talked about that. Actually, Victor, you talked about that. What do you think TIP can do to help us in that regard?
Yeah, I do think that, first of all, I do think that analytics and measurement in particular are very important, and I really do see TIP as an amazing vehicle to help facilitate that. First of all, conversations like this are just immensely helpful, right? So we should keep doing that. But the other thing I'll add is, so earlier we spoke about how it's important for us to be working together as an ecosystem, right, in enabling metaverse-ready networks. It would be great if TIP could be one of the places where those common standards are discussed and defined. And maybe those aren't necessarily technical standards. Perhaps they're standards around network performance, right? And that might be just an interesting and just new concept for us to consider. But I do submit that folks like you all and the industry at large through TIP can be a great place for us to figure out, again, which of the metrics that actually matter, what are the right use cases that we ought to be thinking about to set standards so that when we make claims a year from now or X number of years from now that a network is capable of delivering experience Y, we all know exactly what that means and be quite confident, right, in that statement. And I see TIP as playing a really important role in helping to rally members of the ecosystem and really help us define what that means for us. So for me, that's where I'll stop in terms of the role I see TIP playing. Just being able to convene groups of folks and help us steer in the right direction.
So Juan Carlos, I'd like to ask you this final question for our panel. You're a board of directors member of TIP, and you are deeply familiar with how TIP works, as well as the impact it has on the industry, like, for example, in Open RAN. From that perspective, how do you see TIP working towards enabling the metaverse and enabling networks that can carry metaverse traffic?
Well, as we have seen in the discussion, so really we have already some elements we will need for the metaverse, but there is plenty of things to be done. No, as Victor said, so we need to make the network become a platform open. We need to improve significantly the efficiency of the network elements to be able to deliver this increasing processing and data usage that we see. We need to work on the metrics as well, but not only in defining the metrics, but also the methods for calculating the metrics, so that everyone is measuring in the same way and we can compare the metrics. That this is extremely relevant. And the fine-tuning, the definition, experimentation, fine-tuning of all these systems and development is something that will require experimentation with multiple stakeholders. Okay, it's not just network operators, technology providers, cloud providers. It will be, there will be a need to have many parties collaborating. And TIP is the right place for that experimentation, for that development, for that testing, for that integration of systems, and finally show, the community the feasibility of the new developments. And I think in that regard, TIP up to now has been very successful on many topics like Open RAN and Open Transport. And I think in the metaverse it may play also a significant role in the development of all these technologies we've been talking about.
Yeah, and we hope that this discussion here would seed some activities within TIP, both within existing project groups like Open RAN and OCN, which is the Open Core, and maybe even on the transport side, and maybe even like for the formation of new project groups, like for example on meta analytics and so on. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for questions for the panelists or even a discussion within the floor on topics that we discussed today. Go on. Do we have a mic for the audience?
There is someone there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name's Danny. I'm from Korea. We're a education metaverse startup, and I have a question for the panelists. I think one of the key terms in the metaverse space is, along with interoperability, is scalability, and its potential to basically scale across many industry verticals. So it's really been interesting to hear about the networks, but I was wondering if, from the networks perspective, are there any very exciting verticals in the industry, whether it's e-commerce, in the industrial sector, or for us it's education. When you think about not just killer apps or numbers, but when you think about some of the nuances of the industry, are there things that excite you from a network perspective, challenges, anything of that sort? I think it would be interesting to hear, not just generically the metaverse.
Yeah.
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I can take it. So I guess you were talking about education, no? Metaverse. Yeah, we have already experienced some trials on education using augmented reality and making possible for a teacher in a classroom to take the whole students to somewhere else and to see live things like a cathedral or a monument and be able to explain and show the art as if they were there. Okay, so I think in education it is a clear example of application of the metaverse, a very clear one. Okay, but the problem that we see here is not making probably a trial and a test, is to make this accessible to anyone everywhere. So this is probably the challenge, not to make that an education tool that all students worldwide can access to. No, and this is probably the challenge we have. For which we still have to do a lot of work in this community and probably many more players. Okay.
Yeah, I think a similar case, and that's a great one, Juan Carlos. We're experimenting a lot with enterprise use cases, right? Because the reality is, even though all the hype is on consumer and gaming, and rightfully so, because they've been doing this for a lot longer, but the reality is that we see a huge potential market in enterprise. And if we just look at something simplistic, remote assistance. In fact, this is a part of our product lineup that we have that includes, HoloLens or traditional, AR kit on your iPhone, for example. That's hugely, I would say, innovative in the sense that now you have an expert that perhaps is, in their office and is able to propel their skills to anyone that's out there wearing either a HoloLens or an AR or a VR headset, or potentially a phone, so they can see what they see and provide active feedback to that junior person that happens to be out on the field. So that's a number. We have now hundreds of use cases. Customers are doing those kinds of things across all industries, right? And including education, right? Which is another use case for that.
And I would assume healthcare would be another one where there's
another
a lot of applications.
significant one for sure.
Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions? Good.
Thanks for the panel discussion. The topic's extremely interesting. I'm Dara Grealish. I'm from 56K Cloud. And I have a question regarding this whole platform adoption and the use case around network slicing and NEF's network exposed functions. So if you look at like the iOS and Android ecosystem on the edge, on the devices on the side, and the developer onboarding and, let's say, critical mass generated, and then if you look at the public cloud and the likes of, let's say, the Kubernetes ecosystem, like how it's now across all the hyperscalers, it's accessible to all the developers, like what Docker did, created that critical mass, that easy adoption, breaking down those technical boundaries in order for them to build on the cloud across providers. How are we going to, let's say, remap that adoption on the network layer? Like how are we going to make things like network slicing, network slice typing, dynamic network slicing accessible that, like if you take Metaverse as an application use case, but the meta applications, even something as simple as WhatsApp, how do we put those tools in front of those developers that break down those contractual boundaries, those technical boundaries, and also across operators? Imagine a 5G roaming application trying to operate between Telefónica and Vodafone and the same slice network template, or let's say the design, the experience. Because if you think about it, you know, the operators, we need to throw them a new bone in terms to be more competitive. It can't be this race to the bottom between latency, speed, and edge compute accessibility. There needs to be a more dynamic offering. And if we want to, let's say, break down the incumbents that are behind a lot of the major operators, and for them to see network slicing, like you hear this enterprise slicing, I mean, I'd love to understand your perspective there and how we take like Facebook Metaverse as a developer-focused company, and how we bring that developer focus to telcos.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I want to actually get Victor's opinion first, because he is really the expert amongst us here.
Yeah. I wasn't sure I get the question because it was hard to listen from here, but if I got it correctly, I think it's actually what we were talking before. It's about all these APIs that will make it available for developers to consume. It will work for network slicing. We'll have developers just letting us know what kind of performance you need. Is it like you need a very low latency application? Is it that you need a very high speed, or like you need, I don't know, low jitter? You just let us know what you need, and then we take care of everything else. Like we will like need to composite most likely different APIs to make that happen. But I mean, all that magic will just happen underneath. It will be transparent for you. So we need to work together with other operators, as we were saying before, to expose those kind of service APIs in a way that are easily understandable for developers, because otherwise it would make no sense. But that's the idea behind it.
So if I may add,
yeah, sure.
Just to complement what Victor said, because you were asking how the industry is moving to get that done. So there are a number of initiatives ongoing already in the industry. The GSMA has the operator platform group that is defining precisely the interfaces to customers to expose all these capabilities, the interfaces between service providers so that you can connect different operators and service providers across the world and provide a universal service so that you can use your Metaverse application, your Edge application, or your 5G applications anywhere in the world. And this is working in combination or in coordination with the Linux Foundation and Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Okay, so and whatever is done in these platforms, customer facing, is something we want to do with partners in the cloud that are the ones that application developers are used to work with for developing their applications. And then on the network side, as also Victor said, we have all the network capability exposures of 3GPP systems, transport systems, radio systems. There we need to work with the standardization bodies of the telecom industry, that is ETSI, that is 3GPP, that is IETF, that is Oran Alliance, that is all these guys. But this work is something that should be hidden to the developer. It's a complexity that the developer should not see. And that's why on the northbound interface, on the interface to the customer, we need to have a cloud mindset and expose capabilities in a way that is easy to consume and understand for the developer. Okay.
Yeah, I think both Juan Carlos and Victor covered a lot of stuff, but from the Meta perspective, you brought up a very interesting topic, which is there is an absolute need to harmonize. In order to create the ecosystem, we first have to harmonize the language we use, the APIs. We're starting off with metrics as one of them, like how do you define quality of experience and quality of service. And actually, Rick and I had a conversation the other day that reminds me of this, because we're coming from different companies, we measure quality of experience in a different way, and even within each of our companies, different services measure this quality of experience in very different ways. So there's a need to harmonize both internally, externally, and throughout this industry. And I hope that TIP can play a pivotal role in getting us there, and that's what Meta would contribute towards TIP, or planning to contribute towards TIP as well. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Any other? We're almost out of time, but we can probably take one more question or comment. Okay. Oh, Vish.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Very interesting panel, in fact. Talking beyond networks and the development of an ecosystem around networks, could you sort of elaborate a little bit on maybe device strategy for the industry? Is there anything, have you thought of anything that would be required to try and drive forward not only critical mass and scale, but also economies of scale and new devices that come into the market?
I could take a stab, at least from our perspective. One is price point. So price point of the hardware, right? So the applications will come, but the reality is that you have to have an affordable experience, whether that's the headset, whether that's the device that doesn't exist yet. The reality is if it's not reachable by the vast majority of consumers, you're not going to have the scale. It's not going to evolve quickly enough, and so that's a challenge. We've been looking at things for years. How do you make an AR, VR, XR headset lighter? Do you move some of the compute to the edge, for example, and still be able to provide the latency and performance requirements necessary for you to have a good experience, right? So lots of work going on there, and maybe next year we'll have something to announce. Who knows?
Cool. We're over time. I'd like to thank everyone here and everyone joining us on live stream, as well as the panelists here, and especially Telefónica for providing this lovely space for us. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a good rest of MWC and a good trip back home.
Thank you.
Thank you.